the last 2 hours before his arrest. Back at the camp, Zebedee took Jesus aside and revealed to him that he had been keeping an eye on Judas for several days and knew that Judas was betraying him at that very moment. Jesus listened to him, but only said, "Friend, nothing can happen to the Son of Man unless the Father in heaven allows it. Do not let your heart be troubled. All things will work together for the glory of God and for the salvation of people." While Jesus was speaking with David, Simon the Zealot secretly called all the apostles together and handed them a sword. They accepted these weapons and girded themselves, except for Nathanael. He refused to arm himself and said, "Brothers, the Master has repeatedly told us that his kingdom is not of this world, and that his disciples should not fight with the sword to establish it. I do not believe the Master needs us to take up the sword to defend him. We have all seen his great power and know that he could defend himself against his enemies if he wanted to. If he does not wish to resist his enemies, it must be because this course of action means fulfilling the will of his Father. I will pray, but I will not take up the sword." When Andrew heard these words from Nathanael, he also returned his sword to Simon the Zealot. Thus 9 of them were armed when they went off to sleep. Jesus' cheerful demeanor diminished. As the hour passed, he became more serious, and his face appeared sorrowful. The apostles, who were deeply shocked, were reluctant to go to their tents, even when the Master strongly urged them to do so. He said, "My friends, go now to rest. Prepare yourselves for the work of tomorrow. Remember that we all must submit to the will of the Father in heaven. My peace I leave with you." After he said this, he gestured for them to go to sleep, but as they walked away, he called Peter, James, and John back and said, "I would like you to stay with me for a little while longer." Under normal circumstances, the apostles would have personally said good night to the Master, but this evening their thoughts were so filled with the sudden realization of Judas's betrayal, and so overwhelmed by the unusual nature of their Master's farewell prayer that they simply listened to his words of farewell and silently went to their tents, not knowing that they would never see Jesus alive again. As Andrew walked away, he passed by Jesus, and softly Jesus spoke to him one last time. "Andrew, do what you can to keep your brothers together until I come back to you. After I have drunk this cup, strengthen your brothers. Remember my words. I have told you everything in advance. Peace be with you." The apostles fell asleep because they were completely exhausted. They had been sleep-deprived since their arrival in Jerusalem and had endured much uncertainty. When the 8 apostles finally went to their tents, Jesus called Zebedee and said, "Send me your fastest and most reliable messenger." David summoned a certain Jacob. Jesus said to him, "Go quickly to Abner in Philadelphia and say to him, 'The Master sends you a greeting of peace and says that the hour has come for him to be delivered into the hands of his enemies who will put him to death, but that he will rise from the dead and will soon appear to you before he goes to the Father, and that he will then give you counsel until the time when the new teacher comes to dwell in your hearts." When Jacob had repeated this unusual message to the Master's satisfaction, Jesus sent him off with the words, "Do not be afraid, Jacob, that anyone could harm you, for tonight an unseen messenger will walk beside you." The apostles' camp was secluded behind a high rock wall. On the other side of this ridge, closer to the Garden of Gethsemane, a group of prominent disciples had set up their camp. The distance between the two camps was about 150 meters, and the quickest route was a narrow ravine that cut through the rock wall. That day, the Greeks they had recently met in Jerusalem, at the house of Joseph of Arimathea, had pitched their tents near those of the disciples. This was not a coincidence. The Greeks knew where the apostles' camp was located and had decided to come there on their own initiative. After the messenger had departed, Jesus walked to the disciples' camp and sought out the leader of the Greeks. He said, "My brother, do not be troubled about what is about to happen, for I have warned you about all these things in advance. The Son of Man will be put to death by the chief priests of the Jews, but I will rise again and will be with you for a short time before I go to the Father. You will witness these things." When you see it happen, do not be afraid, but glorify God and strengthen your brothers." None of the apostles expected anything unusual to happen that night, as it was already so late. They tried to sleep to be able to rise early in the morning, prepared for the worst. They thought the chief priests would try to have their master arrested early in the morning. Only David, Zebedee, and John Mark understood that Jesus' enemies would come with Judas that very night. David had already slept a bit that evening, so he had offered to keep watch over the camp that night. Before beginning his self-imposed duty as a sentry, David said goodbye to Jesus and said, "Master, serving you has brought me much joy. My brothers are your apostles, but I have found it wonderful to do the less important things when they needed to be done, and I will miss you with all my heart when you are gone." Jesus looked at David, placed his hand on his shoulder, and said, "David, my son, others have done what was asked of them, but you have served me of your own free will, and your devotion has not gone unnoticed. You know that my hour has come, but one day we will serve together in the eternal kingdom." David looked at the ground and said to Jesus, "Master, do you know that I have arranged for your family to come here? I received a message from a courier that they are now staying in Jericho. They will arrive here early tomorrow morning because it would be too dangerous for them to travel at night." Jesus looked down at David and simply said, "So be it." While all of this was happening at the camp on the Mount of Olives, Judas was conferring with the captain of the temple guard, who had ordered his men to prepare to arrest a criminal that night.